In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the organ for task 1A. Now, this organ part starts in the middle of the first verse, okay? The first note is this D note, which is D3 in your piano roll, just above C3, which is middle C. Remember, the key, once again, has 3 sharps. So whenever you see a C, it's actually a C sharp. Whenever you see an F, it's an F sharp. Whenever you see a G, it's a G sharp. The only other complex thing about this note is the way that some of the rhythms are tied together. Now you'll notice in this 4th bar that we've actually got this B note that actually ties across a bar and a half. So here's where it starts, and here's the other half bar. You've also got things like this, where the bottom note is tied, so it lasts for 2 bars, but these top 2 notes are not tied and only last for a bar each. Okay, so you'll see that a few times where it actually, some of the notes drag across three bars. So you've got this top note here, which is the A, and it's dragging across or lasting for 3 bars, okay? Where this bottom note is actually changing, so it lasts for 2 bars, but then it changes when it gets to here. Okay, so you have to be very careful of the way that the notes are tied. So just spend a bit of time just making sure you get those tied notes correct. Okay, so the organ sound itself is a vintage B3. I'm a huge fan of the B3. If you're using Logic, we've got a B3 built in, which is fantastic, and I'll show you the preset in a second. If you're using any others, you will not find it hard to get a VST B3 instrument that sounds fantastic out of the box. It's such a popular instrument to use, and this song is no different. So for those using Logic, I've started with a preset, so I've come over to the vintage B3 organ and I've gone down to this tone wheel organ. Now I've had to do quite a lot of manipulation with this sound, but unlike all other sounds, all the manipulation, the EQ, the reverb, and any other effects and panning that you want is actually done on the instrument itself. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that you'll see very few happening in the effects here because it's actually all on the instrument. Once again, this sound is quite low, so I've just brought the sound down, but depending on how you set up this instrument, it will depend on the overall sound quality. So the B3, I've been using 3 main panels. So the main panel gives you an overview of all the kind of various controls. So you can set the master distortion, you can set the tone for the keys, and these are your master sounds. So the first thing that I've done from this preset of tone wheel organ is just adjusted these sounds until I get that tone right, okay? Once again, I've done a lot of compare and contrast. Let me just minimize this down a little bit, make it a bit smaller. So I've done a lot of compare and contrast. Now, the best way of doing this is just set up your loop bar, and I've just done one section at a time because the first part that's in the verse is slightly different to the pre-chorus part, which is all chords. So we've got individual notes going into all chords. So do a lot of compare and contrast, soloing from the master track to this original. Once again, checking that all the rhythms from the score have been inputted right. So you can just solo the master track and look at this piano roll and just check that you can hear the sound. Okay, so let's just play that now over these 5 notes.
I hate it when you hiss and preach about your new messiah, 'cause you're
okay, so you can hear those notes very, very clearly when you're looking at it in the piano roll. And you can see that from the score that's absolutely spot on. You've got that lovely kind of warm sound within this. So with the preset that I've already got and the manipulation that I've done, let me just show you where I'm at with it. And once again, the preset won't cover the actual sound. You're gonna have to come into the actual organ itself and do some manipulation, but this is what I've got so far. So let me just solo this sound. And let's go back to that sound again. Just hear theirs.
Hate it when you hiss and preach about your new messiah, 'cause
and as you can hear, it's fairly kind of accurate. It's not too far off it now. So let's just hear this pre-chorus part.
I can't find your silver lining. I don't need
Okay, and we'll come to my one just so you can hear it. And I'll take it off as solo so you can actually hear it with the mix this time. And once we get the vocals in, and once we get all the other instruments in, you'll see that that's sitting quite well in the mix. Now, once again, all of the panning, all of the EQ, and all of the effects are done within the actual instrument itself. So the next one that I've come to is the rotation cabinet, and I've had to adjust the way the rotation works, the way that the actual rotating speaker works on this. And there's a few settings that you can do, but it's generally just trial and error. And because you've got these lovely little notches here, it's very easy to kind of have a play with the sound, and then put it back to the original setting if it stops working. Okay. That's pretty much all I've done here, is just move the microphone and move the rotation speed until I get the kind of sound that I want, that kind of warm sound. To manipulate the speakers from left to right, you're just going to want to reduce the width. It's got a little bit of stereo left and right where it's kind of whizzing around both speakers, but it's not as wide as it would be. So just bring in this width parameter for the stereo speakers until you find the right controller, okay? Next thing you're going to want to do is apply some EQ and apply some reverb, just to and maybe a bit of distortion as well, just to kind of get the sound right. So this is the last panel that I've used to adjust this. So the main, the rotating cabinet, and this effects one. And you're going to find your distortion parameters and your reverb. This air type works really well. You can go to a medium room, a large room, or whatever you want, or a spring reverb. But the air it gives me that warm sound that I want. And I've had to push it up ever so slightly because there is quite a lot of reverb on this track. Now, with the EQ, you're going to find that the actual sound of their organ has a lot of the lower frequencies still in it. So kind of just find those low frequencies just by pushing out the low frequency a little bit. Once again, if you get it wrong, just remember where the setting was and put it back afterwards. Do one dial at a time, and that's going to help you. And same with the distortion. What you're going to find is you probably want just a little bit more distortion at the beginning, and then when it gets to here, you don't actually need as much. What I've done to save me automating this parameter, and you're more than free to go ahead and automate this, but I've actually just found a happy medium where it just works. That's pretty much all I have to say about creating the sound. Once again, in the actual lesson, I will put these screenshots in so you can have a play with my settings and then try and manipulate them so you get the sound absolutely 100%. At the moment, I'm hearing the organ in verse 1 and this pre-chorus. I was intending to put it in the last verse and the last pre-chorus, but to my ear, I'm not 100% sure if it's the strings taking over that part or if it's the organ. So once I've got the strings in, I will have another look just to make sure, to see if it is there or not. In the score, it certainly suggests that it is only playing for the verse and the pre-chorus. But I mean, it might be there, it might not. I'm not in a position where I'm saying actually that's whole high, because the mix is quite dense at these points. So it's worth keep listening to it and get a few extra parts in, and then make those decisions later on whether it repeats itself. And it might be that you have to work out some of the chords for these. In the previous lesson, I've already attached all the chords, so you can go through them and you can work out the padded chords, and we'll go through it. Now, that's pretty much it for me. So have a go, get these notes inputted. Feel free to play them in if you're confident enough, but this is a part that I would probably just type in. It was fairly easy to do, and it's fairly accurate. Remember to have a look at kind of manipulation of the groove, manipulation of the velocity notes, just so it's getting past those mechanical marks on the marking scheme, okay?